Hi, I'm Peter Capaldi. I play the Doctor, and you're watching EMS Productions.
Hello everyone, welcome along to this week's Doctor Who review video, where I'll be taking a look back at one of what turns out to be one of the most important episodes of Series 9, The Girl Who Died. So, The Girl Who Died. What hype came from this when we found out that Maisie Williams was going to be in this episode back in, well, this time last year. Well, from my point of view, this time last year. March 2015, I think it was, when they announced, oh, it's going to be 2 episodes with Maisie Williams in. It's a 2-parter, but it's not actually a 2-parter. And lots of people just thought, oh, she's a nice guest character, she'll just be in it for a couple of episodes, it'll all be happy days. And look how that turned out. But this episode, watched it again yesterday for this review, and I don't think my opinion changed that much of it really. It has some of my favourite Doctor dialogue, which I think makes this episode quite a lot. It's just some of the dialogue that he has about the pain that he feels and the loss of all the people that he loses. And well, I mentioned this in the Series 9 review, the big general video, that it kind of, the last 10 minutes make this episode, and I think, having watched it again, that is still true, that you'll remember you'll remember Ashilda and the last 10 minutes from this episode generally. The first 35 minutes with the Vikings and stuff is kind of just a rompy comedy plot to just sort of get the story, so we can have a story and kind of set up Ashilda dying, really, I guess. So it's an interesting episode of sort of, not 2 halves, but 1 3/4 and a quarter. That sounded a terrible way of explaining it, but you get what I mean. I thought I'd take a slightly different tact at this review, and maybe sort of, rather than kind of almost running through the episode like I have done on some of the previous ones, I thought I'd look at sort of the main themes of this episode, because I feel like that's quite important and introduces lots of features that are relevant to the arc of Series 9, and that's where it's good to do these reviews retrospectively and after the series ended, so then you can really, with a video like this, I can really look back and see where everything fits together and what this bit is actually telling us and showing us, whereas when you review it during the series, it's just all this mysterious thing has happened, I wonder what it'll actually mean later on. So that's why I think it's good to have a review at this point in time, once we've had all the whole series and the aftermath of it. And so one of the biggest themes, I guess you'd say, for this episode is the rules of time and breaking the rules. And I think that's, well, it's a big part of this series in general. I'd say that's one of the main arcs of the series, is about the Doctor breaking the rules, essentially, obviously to save Clara at the end of the series. But in this episode we get that first mention earlier, right after the sort of, after the opening, at the end of the opening sequence, with Clara escaping that alien worm thingy. That was all a bit random, wasn't it? For an opening sequence. I mean, I guess it was just what they felt like, but it did seem a bit strange. And then Clara mentions, obviously, to Doctor, what are the rules? You always talk about the rules, but what actually are they? And then he was talking about how time travellers can make ripples, but not tidal waves. And of course, at the end of the episode, he says, I might have created a tidal wave with Ashilda, because, well, that wasn't a good move to bring it back. And so this is one of the main themes, I think, of this episode and this series, is about the rules and what he's supposed to do and not supposed to do, as we get in that last 10 minutes with the Doctor realising his face is kind of telling him, you can actually break the rules, but actually it's a mistake to break the rules, as the rest of the series proves. And well, he breaks the rules, and it never goes right for him at the end, in Hellbent, obviously, at the end of the series. And there are just other few moments later on in the series where he takes time into his own hands, if you like, and also slightly different, but also using his regeneration energy, which is familiar. That's breaking the rules a little bit there of regeneration, if you like, rather than, it's not the same as sort of changing history and stuff, but I still think that that's another sort of reference to him breaking the rules, something he's not supposed to do, just using that little bit of regeneration energy. And then of course we get it in a big way in this episode, I think. And so that sort of, because I guess it's not something that they look at too often, is what effect the Doctor has when he's sort of particularly going back in history, and what effect these little changes that he makes actually has, and to what degree you can make a change and what effect it will be, and what effect it will have on the future, if you like. And so, and then when he talks about how he needs to, it's just one village. What'll happen if I save this village? It'll make the Maya. It'll make the Maya sort of target Earth, and it'll end the Earth possibly with this sort of maybe slightly melodramatic, over the top way of thinking on it. But I thought there again he's referencing how just doing that small thing of just saving this little tiny town that's fairly cut off from anything else can create a tidal wave, because he's defeated the Maya. And it's interesting to look at and think about how how the small things can have such a big difference within the show. Obviously this is irrelevant to real life, changing the past, because it's not physically possible, but it's a really interesting concept within the show, I think, and it's really nicely represented in this episode. Obviously Ashilda is the figurehead of that, if you like, of this theme of breaking the rules and the tidal waves and changing history just to save that little Viking girl. Just he feels the compassion, as Davros mentioned before in the second episode, of course, that the Doctor always has compassion, and he just felt that he had to break the rules. And then he realises in the TARDIS later on, of course, his emotions got to him, and he knows, I might have just made a very big mistake. And so he lets the emotions get the better of him sometimes, which is where mistakes are made, as we see with Ashilda. And I think that has a big effect on the whole. Well, it has a big effect on the whole series, of course, with Ashilda coming back in so many episodes, so many joyous episodes that we get to discuss later in the series. So yeah, that's one of the main points of one of the main themes of this episode, I think. And well, I don't think there's that much more to say about this, really. It's a big plot point for the whole series, I think. And well, as we go through the episodes, if I notice anything more relating to breaking the rules, other than Hellbent, obviously, then I'll pick it out and give it a mention, because I think it's nice to sort of pick out the arcs and the themes of the series that maybe you don't always notice when you watch it first time through, because you don't know what's going to happen, so you can't piece it together quite as well, I think. And so that's why it's great to do it this way. Now, I think one of the other main sort of themes, and also almost the whole sort of story, was essentially a comedy of errors, if you like. The old phrase that probably from Shakespeare or something. I really should know that, but I don't. So there you go. But it feels like the episode is punctuated by the main characters all making mistakes. You have the Doctor making the mistake. It's only some of the little, some are big. Just the Doctor at the start making the mistake with the sunglasses that just get snapped by the Vikings. And well, Clara kind of makes a mistake by trying to help out Ashilda, and then Ashilda makes the massive mistake of declaring war on the Maya when Clara was going to get it all sorted out. There's another theme to discuss in a minute. And then the Doctor obviously making the tidal wave of a mistake in bringing Ashilda back, and I think that sort of was one of the other key themes of this episode. Yes, the Doctor makes that massive mistake with Ashilda, and that sort of, if you like, confirms the thoughts that that's the main theme of this episode, is about each of the characters making these mistakes which have ripples and tidal waves, and linking back to the other theme. And so it's a very interesting mix of themes within the episode, I think, which creates... There's a lot more to it than it's just a comedy Viking episode, because yes, there is a part that is just, oh, look at these comedy inaccurate Vikings with their helmets that apparently are inaccurate, even though I have no idea, because I really know nothing about Vikings. But apparently they're inaccurate, and they're all funny and silly and useless at fighting. And so let's put the episode down for trying to do something funny, because that's not allowed in Doctor Who anymore. And I think that's a bit of a poor argument against this episode, because it's actually a really good episode. Yes, it's got that comedy element, but you've got a lot of themes in there, and you get lots of great moments. This episode is punctuated by great moments between the Doctor and Clara, and how their relationship is continuing to develop, and how we see again the Doctor's got a duty of care, as he says, that he wants Clara to go now. He doesn't want her to stay when the Maya are about to attack. He wants to keep her safe, to get her out of the way, keep her safe, and she knows that she won't do that. She'll never leave him alone, and so she almost eggs him on and convinces him to keep going and to help those useless Viking farmers, basically, that they were, to try and actually defeat the Maya. And also another interesting Dr. Clara moment is, of course, when the doctor says you need to get a hobby, and she says, I have a hobby, it's you, by the way. Which, although she uses the word hobby, but I think it's a bit more than a hobby to her, and she's kind of got nothing else. I mean, you don't have a person who's your hobby, do you? You have something you enjoy doing, not a person. So it's an interesting way of phrasing it, and it kind of shows that she's got nothing much else other than this pretty pointless teaching job to create her interesting character. She hasn't got much else to do, so the doctor's everything. Why she would never leave him alone to defeat the Maya and run away. She'd never do that, and well, that kind of ultimately costs her. And of course, the other theme of the series, the arc, Reckless Clara, we see that, Clara becoming the Doctor. We see that in abundance here with her confronting Odin, aka Mr. Campy. Check out the Horns of Nimon for the campiest performance ever. I might put a picture up of what's-his-face from the Horns of Nimon, who is literally the campiest performance you've ever seen. I'll put a link to the video and an image now. Look at his face. You just know he's really campy, don't you? And Odin, whatever, is he actually just called Odin in the episode? I can't remember. Maybe he was called, because he's fake Odin, isn't he? But I can't remember if he was actually had a name. But yeah, I don't know who it was played by, but it was the campiest and over the top and interesting performance that you've ever seen. But it's nothing compared to that Horns of Nimon performance, which in this scene that hopefully you have clicked the link to and are going to watch, it literally appears like he's trying to outdo himself with every line he says, trying to make it louder and more over the top and excited than the previous line. It's completely laughable. It really is. I don't know how Lalla Ward and Tom Baker kept a straight face while he was doing this performance, because it's just so laughable. But anyway, that's our comedy moment for the week. Campy Odin. And Clara obviously shows herself to be like the Doctor again, and the Doctor assumes that she's going to be able to do that, to just talk Odin out of actually... Let's just call him Campy Odin, because it's a great name. She tries to talk Campy Odin out of waging war, and she's got... Basically, she's going to do it until Ashilda butts in, makes the mistake, the error, the other main theme of the episode, and, well, that kind of stuffs everything up. But it's nice to see that you see that the Doctor is kind of aware that Clara's becoming that sort of confident and a bit like him, and the Doctor's aware of that, and at this point he's happy, he's fine with that, it's all cool, because she saved the day, basically, so it's all good. And so he's already aware that she's going a little bit over the top. And we saw it in before, Under the Lake. He had a smile when she said, "Oh, let's go and explore this place." And he looked happy. Obviously, there's the moment with the duty of care, but generally he seems pretty happy about her being Dr. Clara or Reckless Clara or whatever you like. And he seems, and at this point, he's sort of, although he's aware of the consequences, I guess, up until the end of this episode, he doesn't really think about it. And then really, when Ashilda dies, it hits him that he loses so many people, and Clara's going to be the next one, whether he likes it or not. And well, I'll come to this last scene later on, because it's a wonderful scene, and I want to really expand on that bit. But yeah, so this is another great episode for Clara, really. I mean, I've said that she's a bit underused in this series, I think that's fair to say, but this is one of her better episodes where she actually has quite a bit to do. Although Jenna had quite a bad cold, her voice is rather sort of squeaky and snuffly, isn't it? She must have been suffering with rather a cold for when they filmed this episode this time last year also. And which is kind of noticeable, and particularly in the moment where she's holding the phone at the end, her voice goes proper squeaky, doesn't it? Slightly funny moment there. It's obviously not really, well, it's kind of meant to be funny. But yeah, so Jenna wasn't particularly well then. And well, I might as well give a quick mention to the actual Viking plot. I don't want to go into too much depth because I wasn't too bothered about the Viking plot, frankly. It's just a part of the episode which is enjoyable while you watch it, but doesn't make the episode. And so with it, you've obviously got the rubbish Vikings, the useless Vikings essentially of the lot, declaring war on the Maya, who are yet another generic robot, best race in the galaxy, the most powerful army in the galaxy. They don't get defeated, this kind of stuff. You're pretty generic for a comedy episode, generic robot villain who are supposedly amazing and then get defeated, obviously. You've got your campy Odin as your sort of the leader for the robots, because you always got to have a leader who's a bit campy. That's just how it works in comedy Doctor Who. We had that a bit in the Robot Show in Series 8 with old, is it the Sheriff Nottingham or something, that guy who was controlling all the like robot-y people. Yes, another generic robot race. He was a bit of a nice campy performance there as well, and so that seems to be, that's how you play the part in a comedy episode. But whatever, it's just a bit of a laugh. And so obviously the rubbish comedy Vikings, not the Vikings, the rubbish Maya, the generic robot army, get defeated because they had to be. But it's quite depressing, and it is a slight letdown that they're essentially defeated by internet in galactic YouTube is essentially what's beaten them. I mean, they've just, well, Ashilda's magical projection of a dinosaur, or not dinosaur, a dragon even, has scared them away, and whatever his name was, one of the useless Vikings, is recording it on Clara's phone. Stick a bit of the Benny Hill theme on, and if it goes over to the space YouTube, then, or space tube, there you go, then, well, they're stuffed, so they're beaten by that. And I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch of a decent way of defeating an army. I mean, it's not the greatest, is it? Let's be honest, it's not the greatest resolution. And I mean, the fire in the water with the electric eels and stuff, I feel like I'm not an expert on science or any of these kind of things, but I kind of find it slightly hard to believe the science of this episode and that it would actually work. Clearly, you've got to suspend your disbelief, because you've got to do that in all TV, and particularly with this episode, that's just a lot of Doctor Who's like that, particularly comedy Doctor Who, when they don't try to make it too scientifically accurate. Clearly Kill the Moon went to the limit of scientific inaccuracies. Gotta love Kill the Moon, yeah. But it's a little bit of a stretch with the fire in the water, but I'll forgive it. I'll forgive it on this occasion, because it's not that important a plot really. And so all the Vikings get to win, beat the Maya, they all just disappear, lose their helmets, disappear. Ashilda dies, and then Ashilda's dead. Oh no! Another character who the Doctor's barely known and has been in all of 20 minutes of this episode has died. What is he going to do, and why is he so sad? Well, let's talk about Ashilda. Ashilda, me. Anybody else you want to call her? Mare me. And Me's a stupid name, as I've said many times. Me is a stupid name, so she's Ashilda, and she will always be Ashilda because that's a better name. And in this episode, I loved the foreshadowing of the moment when the Doctor and Clara are having a little chat, and she says, "In the end, all that anybody can hope for is a good death, unless you're an immortal." As Ashilda walks past, hint, hint, hint. Ashilda's going to become immortal. What a surprise! The fairly obvious foreshadowing there, slightly obvious. I can't remember whether I realised that at the time. I feel like I was surprised that she became immortal, but maybe I wasn't. I can't remember when I first watched. Well, I can't remember what my reaction was when I first watched that, and how my thought process was. Although slightly off topic, but because I knew this was when the Doctor's Faces thing was going to be explained, and so for some reason, whenever they kept on mentioning fire in the water, I thought that was a reference to Pompeii, because wasn't it like the water pistol, something watery defeated the Pyrovils, the fiery Pyrovil thingies, didn't it? And so I thought that might have been the reference to Pompeii. Obviously it completely wasn't, and we got a fantastic little scene on it. But that was my other main thought in the episode about. That's the main thought I can remember from when I first watched it, you have to say. And so yeah, going off topic there, Ishilda, she's just a normal Viking girl, frankly, she's a bit strange, as we know. She has fairly low self-esteem, I think it's fair to say, and she thinks that she can kill everyone with her mind, apparently, because she's a bit weird. And well, she's obviously played by Maisie Williams, so let's all have Maisie Williams hype. Let's rave over Maisie Williams because she's the most amazing actress to ever grace the television screens. And good old Doctor Who social media still going on about Maisie Williams. Did you know Maisie Williams was in Game of Thrones? And she's in Doctor Who as well. Did you know Maisie Williams was in Doctor Who? The old Game of Thrones person, yeah, she was in Doctor Who. Did you know that? I was going to tell you that every day for the whole year. For the next 2 years, to remind you that she was in Doctor Who. That woman off Game of Thrones, that little girl. She was in Doctor Who. You can see it annoying, can't you? And that's what we had, particularly on Twitter. I know I'm not active on Facebook, so I don't really know, but on Twitter, particularly in the week leading up to this episode, it was just constant. Look, it's Maisie Williams in Doctor Who. It's amazing, and I mean they still do several mentions of it now, and it's 6 months since the series ended, and Shilda's not coming back. Well, I certainly hope so, and I think it's very unlikely that she's coming back. Unless Moffat brings her back for his last series, she won't come back, because I don't think she'll come back under anyone other than Moffat. And so I just don't see it happening. And she's got to come back with Clara, and Clara's not coming back anytime soon, so we shouldn't see her again. So stop talking about her on social media, please, Doctor Who, at BBC Doctor Who, or whatever you call yourselves. I mean, it's very annoying, completely off topic, but if you just search Doctor Who into Twitter, you won't get the BBC account because they have BBC in front of Doctor Who in their handle, which is very annoying. If you're trying to search, you have to put BBC DO, I think, before you actually get the official Doctor Who account, which just seems pretty poor. Why don't you put Doctor Who BBC? It would have made a lot more sense in terms of finding your account, so that's very minor annoyance and completely irrelevant. My pointless annoyances of the day, if you like. So Ishilda, yeah, she's a solid character. I don't think she's anything spectacular like they try to rave about. I disagree with something my friend said, who was that she was a poor actress. I don't think she was a poor actress, just I think the character wasn't particularly interesting, and there wasn't really much for her to play with. I have to say though, I haven't seen Game of Thrones. I've only seen one of the first episode, and that's it. It's not for me. I'm not fussed. Doesn't really interest me. And so I watched one episode, but obviously you've got 12-year-old Maisie Williams in there, or was it maybe 14? And so you don't, and she's not in it very much, I don't think. So I didn't really have any idea of how she'd be like from that. But I did watch Cyberbully, and the Channel 4 programme Cyberbully. It was like a sort of 90-odd minute kind of Phil TV movie kind of thing, where it's literally pretty much just Maisie Williams versus a computer from the point of view of her webcam, I think, in her room for the whole thing. But it's absolutely captivating. She's absolutely brilliant in that. I think that's what Brian Minchin and Stephen Moffat said was why they cast her, or they cast her after seeing that and seeing how good she was in that. That's kind of why they brought her in. And so I thought she was really impressive in that. And go check that out if you haven't. It's really tense, I'll tell you that, but it's actually a really great sort of, no, it's not a documentary, but a nice sort of drama film. Oh, I don't know this. I don't have the right word for you, but it's a great piece of television. There you go. We'll stick with a great piece of television. So I knew she was a really good actress, but I just think that at least in this episode mainly, she didn't have. She just sort of had a few lines with the Doctor, and she kind of, there was nothing that major about her character at any point. She was fairly nice. She's a bit strange, as I mentioned, and then she just dies. They try to make it so that we care about her as a character, but honestly, we don't really care about her that much. I mean, she's been in half an episode and not particularly interesting either, and then she dies. So I think that was, yeah. So Ishilda was okay. I mean, don't have that much to say on her really, because she was just a part of the episode, and clearly she's a lot more important in the future episodes. This is kind of her. Just a starting off episode where she kind of she's a Viking, yeah. She's a bit strange, yeah. And, has the Doctor met her before, or is she remembering in the wrong direction? I quite like that very relevant line of time travel means premonition, isn't it? He remembers in the wrong direction, and so clearly foreshadowing the fact that he would have met Ashilda many times in this series. Obviously 4 episodes in the end, or 3 more if you like. And so nice little, a bit of foreshadowing again there to reference that she'd be turning up again, as much as whether we like it or not. As the 6th Doctor used to say, or once said, sorry, that Ashilda will be back. Well, before I come on to those last few minutes of wonderful dialogue and everything, I thought one other thing, just looking through some of the notes I make a whole page of notes for this episode, well, near enough, of things to talk about, so I'll sit down and properly watch it and think about the episode before I do these reviews, and hopefully that's showing. Maybe it's not and I'm just completely mad. Or this is helping. And, well, the one thing that I thought was slightly out of place in this episode, actually, was I actually called it the Matt Smith moment with the Doctor speaking baby. And I don't think that worked. I mean, with the Doctor in the way he is, he's a much more... I know Series 9 is slightly mellowed, but he's a serious Doctor. And he's sort of... I just don't think that really worked. Obviously, it kind of made sense in the context of the story, kinda. But I just don't think it really fitted in with the 12th Doctor's character for him to be speaking baby. I feel like that's a very Matt Smith thing, and should have stuck with him. So it's only a tiny thing, and didn't really make any difference to the episode, but it was just a little thing I picked up on when watching it and thought, this just looks a bit out of place, doesn't it? Maybe you disagree and you thought, that's all fine, but I think it's a Matt Smith trait, and that it didn't really work on Peter, and we haven't seen it since, and hopefully we won't see it again in his tenure. So, those last 7 or 8 or 10 minutes, which I seem to mention way too much. So let's talk about it. Ashilda's dead. The Doctor's in a ragey state. He's so frustrated. He sees... It really hits him that he loses everyone. He always loses... because he's essentially immortal, he always has to face loss and loses people. And there it makes it even more illogical for him to want to make someone else immortal. For someone else to have that pain that he has of losing everyone, because that's the curse of immortality, I believe. Is obviously that's a 5 Doctors quote, but I feel like that's been used somewhere else as immortality is a curse because you just watch everybody else die. It's not you living forever, it's everybody else dying, and that's obviously we don't understand that because none of us are immortal here, are we? But for the Doctor, it's sort of something that he tries to keep inside, I think, and for some reason this little girl dying that he didn't really know very well has just jerked that and sort of tweaked it, let it out, and he's really sort of realising, as I mentioned earlier, that he's going to lose Clara sooner or later, and that he's not going to be able to cope with that, and he's just going to run away again like he did when he lost Amy and Rory. Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor, just sort of went off and sulked for half the Christmas episode and a few prequels and stuff. And Children Need Specials, the end of 2012, he all had a little sulk, didn't he? Until Clara turns up again, and then it's all happy days, because Clara's amazing, isn't she? She actually is, you know. She's a great character. Don't diss her. But anyway, so we've seen it before with the Doctor sort of going into sulky, miserable mode, running away, and why he was kind of not needed to do that in the end, at the end of Series 9, because his memories were erased, and so he didn't have this memory of loss. Sorry. He didn't have this memory of loss of Clara, and so he didn't need to run in the same way. He was pretty happy in Husband's a River Song, wasn't he? In the most part, he was a nice sort of happy ending, and so he didn't have to run away, but generally he does, and that's the pain he gets, that he feels sort of almost embarrassed, I think, that he has to run away and hide and sort of go off and sulk because he can't cope with it. He can't sort of control his emotions enough to be able to cope with losing so many people, and just they're piling up. So how many companions they've gone through now? Like 25 odd proper companions he's had to say goodbye to, every single one of them, for one reason or another. Clearly there were some he was less sad about than others. I mean, yeah, well, I won't mention any names, but I'm sure there were some that it's a mixed bag of emotions, let's say. And some of the dialogue written in these scenes was, I'm sure it's done by Moffat. I know it was written by Jamie Mathias and Stephen Moffat, but I'm sure that those few minutes of dialogue, proper Doctor dialogue, were written by Moffat, because that's his greatest strength, and that's what I think he can be sort of applauded for most in his writing Doctor Who, is his writing of the Doctor himself and the way that he understands the character so well. And we see that again there in this scene. And about the Doctor doesn't care about losing wars. He'll lose any war you like, he says. And I think we've seen that so many times, that he wants to save the people. He doesn't want to win a war. He just wants to save people. And he feels like he's not allowed to. But then we get the realisation of his faces. We get that little reference in the little shot of his face in the sort of the water tank where the electric eels probably still are, or used to be. And we see his face, a little foreshadowing to, we're going to mention something about his face in a minute, just you wait and see. And then suddenly he realises why he has this face. The sort of story arc of deep breath, and this episode, which is about it, of why he has that face, he doesn't know until now. And then he realises that it's to remind him that he's broken the rules and saved people for the better before, and so he's allowed to do that again. And I think that as a resolution, I really like this resolution. It's simple, it's not over the top, because you could have gone big over the top to why it's his face, maybe something relating to the, like, what was his, Caecilius, or whoever he played in Pompeii, who that character was actually the Doctor or something. You could have gone over so much sort of extreme, full-on story arc of that, which I just didn't think was necessary. I wanted a resolution, but I didn't need a big, full 2-3 series arc on why his face has been seen in Doctor Who before. And so I was fine with this, and I think it was just a nice little way to sort of round off the episode. It fitted in perfectly with this episode and made sense with his character and the way it's been developing everything. And I think it's very nice to see a bit of Ten and Donna again. That's always a nice moment to have them in the show again, even if it's just in a very brief flashback. And seeing 7 years younger Peter Capaldi in Pompeii, just because that all makes sense. And then my poster up there, I'm the Doctor and I save people, and of course he is, but it's not always the right decision to do that, as the ending, well, the rest of the series proves, rather than this episode. This episode doesn't. It just shows, the ending shows a slightly depressed Shilda. It's just like, no, why is this happening to me? I don't like this anymore. This immortality is a terrible thing. And so although it's all happy days at the start, it doesn't end that way. And so, yeah, I love those sort of scenes with the Doctor and Clara in there, and that's all some of the strongest stuff of Series 9 is there. Some of the dialogue scenes they have in their relationship, which is really developed well, particularly by Moffat, of course, because he just knows how to write that stuff, despite what a lot of people say he does, as far as I'm concerned at least. I hope you agree as well that he's actually quite good at writing, even if everybody thinks otherwise. So that makes this a really great episode, and Ashula's alive, she's immortal, she gets the other Maya thingy to make another person immortal, because the Doctor's sort of kind there with that as well. And then we get a good old hybrid meme, like a hybrid, she's a hybrid, we get another mention of the hybrid, well, not the hybrid, a hybrid. That's the other arc of the series, of course, along with sort of breaking the rules and Reckless Clara. And you've got the hybrid, and that's the three main arcs of this series, I think. Maybe there's more, maybe they're not, but whatever, that's my opinion. And that's, well, what else is there to say about this episode, really? I think it's an underrated episode, I think, nowadays, because you kind of come off the back of those for a lot of, well, either the people who love current Doctor Who would have said that 4 episodes were brilliant, or the people who didn't like most of Doctor Who will say, most of Moffat era will say, Before the Flood and Under the Lake, wrong way around, oh great, because they're classic Doctor Who, this is proper how to do it, so they'll like that. So either way, most of the audience are coming off really enjoying the previous sort of set of episodes, and so maybe when you sort of particularly when taking this with The Woman Who Lived, which I think is fair to say isn't that good. I don't think it's that good. I think it's worse than this episode, to be honest. And well, maybe it'll be better when I watch it again and review it for you next week. Maybe it'll be better then, but I don't think it's very good. And I think when you sort of couple it with this episode, which isn't fantastic either, in the general opinion, I think it gets very underrated. And so when you delve into it and really think about it and maybe sort of look past the comedy Viking part of the story a little bit and Campy Odin, then I think if you look past that, it's got a lot of deep depth to the episode, a lot of deep meaning that you can really, and it's really important. It's one of the, I said at the start, it's probably the most important episode, at least before the finale, because it creates a Shilda. Basically, it creates a more sort of Shilda, and well, she's a pretty important character for Series 9, isn't she? She effectively kills Clara and then becomes her companion. Because Moffat! And so, yeah, there you go, that's pretty much all there is to say on this episode. I gave it somewhere near an 8 out of 10, I can't remember. I think it's pretty much on a par with the Ghost previous 2 episodes, I'd say. They're all fairly even, around an 8 out of 10, whereas Magician's Apprentice is slightly more, and The Witch Familiar is a lot more, a lot higher. These 3 are about on a par at about an 8 out of 10. They're all very good episodes, and this one, yes, it's got a Viking plot that isn't that great, without a great resolution, which does mark it down, but there's a lot of depth to it, and it's got some great Dr. Clara scenes, and those last 10 minutes are wonderful, so I think that's why it deserves to be more fondly thought of than maybe it is in the fan base. And so that's just about it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember to follow me on Twitter if you're interested, at EMSDW44, or I'll stop mentioning this at some point, but, you know, trying to grow my followers. I've only got 230 odd, so wouldn't mind a few more. It's always nice when I got 900 subs. Nice to get people following me over there as well for all my thoughts. I mean, I was tweeting about God Who Died, sharing some GIFs or GIFs, whatever you want to call them, I have no idea. And some nice quotes as well yesterday. Well, not yesterday to you, it's a long time ago, but yesterday from my point of view. So I do lots of Doctor Who stuff on there, and hints to the videos and this kind of stuff. So check me out on there. Like the video. Just be great if I subscribe if you're new here. I'd love to get up to 1k, 1,000 subscribers. Over 900 now, of course. Probably quite a bit over 900 by the time you watch this, which is fantastic. And thank you so much for all the people who have subscribed. And well, when I get to 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to be doing a few special videos, because I feel like it's an occasion to do it for, if you like. I'm going to do probably 1k Q&A. Gotta love the rhyme in there. So, well, I'll do a video about it near at the time, but I will then, don't send them in now, want your questions for me. Anything you like, at the time it will be that I'll answer anything pretty much, because, well, I'll probably struggle to get enough questions to fill a Q&A, but whatever, you might find that people want to ask me questions, who knows, we'll see, won't we? And anyway, I'm rambling, as I seem to always do at the end of these videos. So, I'll see you hopefully next week, who knows, it might be 2 weeks, or I don't know when this is actually going up yet. It's several weeks after you're seeing this quite a few weeks after I filmed it, so there you go. Well, hopefully it's The Woman Who Lived this time next week, but who knows for sure. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Elliot, I'm EMS Productions, and I'll see you next time for another Doctor Who review. Bye.